Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku and Momo were in relationship secretly, part 1. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel and like this video, so let's begin the story. Located in the last year of high school in class 1A. When one talks about Yaoi Rozu Momo, one could not define her with a single word. She had several virtues: applied, courteous, elegant, kind, and humble, and no defects. First in her class and intellectually outstanding, you would think that women like her would be ambitious and entrepreneurial, the type who would put her work, or in her case, her grades first, and have no time for friendships. And much less relationships. However, here she was, having an intense session of kissing and caressing in her very classroom. Everything she said before about her seemed to be nothing more than a vile lie, because she was panting and eager to feel more of her lover, who had a libido just as high as hers. And who is the cause of the applied Yaoi Rozu being in such a state of ecstasy? Maybe Kirishima with her manly attitude. Maybe Todoroki, her not-so-secret love. Demons. It could even be Bakugo with her explosive but passionate attitude. None of them. The boy who had Yaoi Rozu letting out small moans of pleasure was Izuku Midoriya himself. Incredible, right? The shyest and quietest boy in the class supported Yaoi Rozu on Izawa-sensei's desk while he caressed her legs and literally devoured her classmates' lips. As they might wonder about two companions who had almost never spoken and who had rarely exchanged words. Well, everything has an explanation and nothing is impossible, you just have to take a look back. Time ago. It's not that this type of activity bothers me, the black-haired woman said tiredly, but why is it always in my room? She said sadly when she saw how her bedroom was filled with bags of fried foods and sweets. It was one of the now typical sleepovers that the girls from class 1A held every weekend. The black-haired girls' classmates were chatting animatedly among themselves. The reason why these sleepovers had become something established for every Friday was the stress that the academy gave them every day in the physical and mental aspects, leaving them fatigued not only to them. The boys usually shared a pizza and drank until late, but their gatherings were not as sacred as the sleepovers the girls had. Because your bed is huge, Ashido responded, sounding obvious. I'm seriously thinking about making it smaller, said the black-haired woman. I don't see what the problem is if we always help you clean up at the end, said Hagakure animatedly. Helping sounds like a lot to me. Kyoka spoke. Asui, Uraraka, and I are the ones who stay to clean, the purple-haired girl said honestly. An aura of sorrow covered Ashido and Hagakure, while the others giggled. Even though Yaoi Rozu complained about the fact that they always used her room, she always ended up enjoying it and even treasured these moments that she shared with her classmates. Taking a quick look at her room, she wasn't surprised to see each of her friends in their place. Kyoka was playing her bass sitting on her desk, Hagakure and Ashido on the bottom of the bed, Asui and Uraraka each sitting on the pretty side of the middle of the bed, and lastly she was sitting on a chair instead of in his own bed. Changing the subject, Ashido spoke, drawing the attention of everyone present. Now that we will no longer have to worry about villains 24 hours a day, he said innocently. It had been more than a year since the villains had stopped being a real danger to the entire world. As always, the striking students of class 1A were involved. In those times the young aspiring heroes did not have even a break to rest. During those times one only had to worry about improving and advancing. We can behave like normal teenagers. The pink-haired girl said happily, raising her arms in the air with excitement. Neither of them said anything for a few seconds, even Kyoka's bass stopped playing at her partner's words. So that means Hagakure broke the ice so we can be in a relationship? I asked innocently. Yaoi Rozu, Uraraka and Kyoka had a nervous twitch. Not only that. Ashido continued, now we are of legal age. Think about the amount of activities we are allowed to do. She smiled enthusiastically. In one thing he is right, Yaoi Rozu said mentally, class 1A was no longer seen as children in any way. Even in their first year, certain classmates were already seen as high-caliber heroes. That was with respect to the ethical and moral side, however, in the physical aspect they were no longer considered children. Well, it's normal that at our age we look for new experiences, Asui said interestedly. Are you on her side? Kyoka spoke in surprise, out of tune with her bass at the same time. We can't avoid our nature, the expressionless black-haired woman responded calmly. It's true, but Yaoi Rozu tried to refute it. You already heard of Asui. Ashido interrupted. It's totally natural. The pink-haired girl winked. Natural, but inappropriate. Uraraka spoke, her cheeks tinted red. I agree with Uraraka, Yaoi Rozu firmly. As future aspiring heroines our vision must be one, and without distraction, she sounded determined. Don't worry. The decision is up to each person after all. Ashido spoke, downplaying his importance. I always wanted to have a high school relationship, said Hagakure excitedly. And now is our chance. Ashido hugged him by the shoulders. The topic we will talk about tonight will be how she spoke dramatically. Yaoi Rozu swallowed. With a slight blush she stood firm like the future heroine she would be in the future. A topic couldn't get her off, or could it? Time skip. It's stupid, the black-haired woman said irritably, drinking her mojito in one gulp, hoping that the cold drink would calm the intense heat she was going through. Let's drink even more. Shouted happily and drunk, Uraraka. I just want to say hick that all of you are like a hick family, I'm sorry. Tokoyami began to cry. As did her partner, who was totally out of her mind thanks to the alcohol. The large circle was formed to comfort the sobbing Fumikage. The small circle was made up more of boys than girls, except for Uraraka. Do you want one more glass? Sato asked the black-haired woman, who was acting as a bartender. Thank you Sato, I handed him Yaoi Rozu's glass. You look worried, don't you want a dessert to relax? The boy asked with a smile and a sparkle in his eyes. I'm fine, it's nothing. The black-haired woman faked a smile. They were delicious by the way, she pointed to his drink. You know what else is delicious, said a voice from behind the black-haired girl. Their body Mineta began to drool. Yes, I think I'll go sit for a while. Yaoi Rozu walked away from the bar. 10 more minutes, and then to bed, the black-haired woman said mentally, sighing, as she took a seat in one of the armchairs in the living room. To sum things up, exam week had ended for Class 1A, so they would have a vacation for a while, and thanks to Kaminari and Ashido, the entire class was celebrating in the high school dormitories. Of course first they had to make some preparations, set up a mini bar, snacks, drinks, and most importantly make sure Ida kept his mouth shut. When night came, no one would think that things could get so out of control, thank heavens that with her quirks gone, the black-haired woman thought. Ida looks like he's about to collapse in a drinking competition with Kirishima and Bakugo. He fell unconscious in the first round, Kaminari and Kyoka acting very affectionate and romantic on one of the couches in front of Yaoi Rozu, Asui, Kuda and Aoyama in a corner, chatting about the most normal things. Then there was the group of inseparable friends composed of Shoji, Shiro and Ejiro, who were comforting the sensitive Fumikage, Ashido and Hagakure, who were a little upset by flirting with Todoroki, who was sitting to the right of her. Despite the feelings that she felt for the boy, there was another reason why she felt irritated. Please try to push the Izuku girl away a little. Don't let me drink, the nerves in his voice. Think I just want a kiss. She shouted, annoying the brunette, leaning even more on the boy's chest to steal a kiss. One, and nothing more, hick, she demanded. I think you shouldn't drink Uraraka anymore. She tried to take the drink from him that another one was holding. I'll stop drinking for one of these, the brunette pointed to her lips. The green-haired man laughed nervously, not knowing what else to do. Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The black-haired woman thought, taking a sip of her drink. They had only started talking and getting to know each other 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. The black-haired girl internally screamed, why did he only have that effect on her? The other boys in his class were equally or more attractive than the boy, although if we talk about physical attractiveness. Shaking her head to erase those thoughts, Yaoi Rozu drank her mojito again in one gulp. Off, damn, Yaoi Rozu cursed, drinking so quickly had made him choke. Yaoi Rozu? The green-haired boy called worriedly, getting up from the chair, letting the winged brunette fall next to him. Any problem? Todoroki asked, focusing his attention on the black-haired girl. I'm fine. It's not a big deal. Yaoi Rozu quickly composed herself. I just choked a little bit, she laughed nervously. Everyone in the chairs fell silent and the music spoke for a few seconds. Deku the brunette spoke in her sleep, she had fallen asleep face down in one of the armchairs. I think I'll take her to her room, said the green-haired man, trying to pick up the brunette. However, she growled or moved with her eyes closed when he approached her. I think it would be better if you wait a little. Aizu Midori, Yaoi Rozu corrected herself at the last second, her face turning red. Okay, the green-haired man agreed, turning around, he realized that now there was only an empty space in the armchairs. Can I? He asked the black-haired girl. Say no, say no, say no. Sure. The black-haired woman responded with a smile. Yaoi Rozu begged, the night was still young for these young people. Time ago. Unlike the sleepovers Yaoi Rozu had with her friends, last night was by far the most fun she had ever had. If she had known that Midoriya had a taste for literature, she would have invited him to her room every night to have a night of pure talks regarding the different works that she both read. It was magical, Yaoi Rozu thought. It had been a long time since she last remembered behaving like a hyperactive teenager, excited about some boy band's latest album, except instead of bands, she was getting excited about books and movies. Thousands of stories that he could now discuss with his new friend. This one is full of surprises. Izuku thought of the black-haired woman with a smile. Even after he had left her room, she couldn't help but write to him on his phone number to tell him about what she was reading and discovering as she progressed in her reading. Without a doubt, what Yaoirozu liked most about the boy was his change of attitude when he felt in accordance with it. It was a complete change of personality. Both seemed like a couple of nerds excited about the latest comic from some famous franchise. Anyway, it was another day, and Yaoirozu wasn't waiting for the moment to tell Izuku the news. Dressing casually, the black-haired woman left her room and headed to the dorm kitchen. As if it were fate, Izuku was quietly eating breakfast. Midoriya. The black-haired girl called animatedly from behind. Good morning. The green-haired man greeted him with a bow. So much formality is not necessary, he said, a little embarrassed by the attitude of his companion, the black-haired woman. You wouldn't guess what I discovered yesterday when you left. She spoke excitedly. Did you finish reading the entire book in one night? The green-haired man said, surprised. Number position in the class, remember, the black-haired woman said egocentrically. It's incredible that you finished it in one night. Izuku praised him. I honestly had to read it more than once to understand that he felt inferior. It wasn't a big deal, yawn, although I'm a little tired, she said with tears in her eyes from the big yawn. You woke up very early, few people wake up at this time, said Izuku. You must have some other reason for getting up early other than eating breakfast alone or not? Yaoirozu asked, pouring herself a glass of juice. Well, I always get up at this time to exercise. The green-haired man scratched his head, a little embarrassed. I completely forgot your quirk because yesterday the black-haired woman said he is a quirk that doesn't go with you with what I know about you now. He laughed a little. You're right, I guess the green-haired man laughed. I'm sorry to ask this, but could we talk about it later? He asked, embarrassed. Finishing drinking her juice, Yaoirozu started to think a little about the little problem that Midoriya had given her. I got it, the black-haired woman thought, snapping her fingers, finding a solution. Can I accompany you? The black-haired girl asked innocently and animatedly. The green-haired boy was speechless. Is it okay? I accepted, not knowing what else to say. Okay. I'll go change, I'll wait for you outside. I speak, as if she were the one inviting him. After Yaoirozu left the kitchen, Izuku remained still and silent for a few seconds. What just happened? Long after. The sound of tapping woke up the black-haired girl. It's 1 in the morning, said Yaoirozu, annoyed and irritated. This week was a nightmare for the black-haired girl, her grades dropped noticeably. Izuku ignores me. Izawa-sensei had called him out for being late so many times. Izuku hates me. Her parents had called her asking why her principal had informed them that her perfect daughter was straying from the path of excellence. She ended up yelling at her own parents, only to end up crying for hours locked in her room. Lastly, and the reason for all the aforementioned things, was the argument she had with Izuku. Yaoirozu. Uraraka shouted furiously, open for me. Now. I hit the door hard. Sai, what do you want? The black-haired girl asked tiredly. Let's go outside. She shouted in the brunette's face. Listen, I already apologized to you before. The black-haired woman felt irritated. I said get out. Now. He grabbed her brown shirt by her shirt, bringing it closer to her face to look into her eyes with fury. Okay. I'm coming. Geez, the black-haired woman accepted, losing her patience a little. Without saying more, Uraraka walked with loud steps to the outskirts of the dormitories. What's going on? Asked a sleepy Ishido, who also woke up because of Uraraka's scandal. Nothing. She just goes back to sleep. Yaoirozu tries not to yell at her, closing her room and heading to the exit of the building. Why was Uraraka screaming? The pink-haired girl asked again with her eyes narrowed. Yaoirozu ignored her and the rest of her companions, who had also woken up by Uraraka's noise, who asked her the same thing as the pink-haired girl. She simply walked past them and headed for the exit. Once outside, she noticed how beautiful the moon looked that night. It shone so brightly that it seemed like it was still daytime. You know why I asked you out, right? Uraraka spoke in front of him, her face full of determination and resentment. Listen, Izuku, and I never wanted to hurt. The black-haired woman trying to explain. Don't involve him in this. The brunette yelled furiously. This is between you and me, she growled, annoyed. We don't have to do this. This is why. Izu's strong blow silenced him. I said don't bring him into this. Uraraka saw him furious. Ouch, the black-haired woman mentally said. The force of the blow had made her fall. She knew that Uraraka was strong, but she didn't think that a single blow from her would draw blood. Uraraka tried to speak as Yaoirozu stood up. Stop. Iida shouted from the door. If either of you continues with this dispute, I will be forced to make a report about it. Iida threatened to wear pink pajamas. Turning to look at the entrance to the dormitories, Yaoirozu was not surprised to see all of her classmates gathered behind Iida as they murmured and had faces full of concern with the act that she and Uraraka started. I don't care. Uraraka shouted defiantly. You can make a report, but you're not going to stop this. He charged towards the black-haired girl. Stop or I will be forced to interfere. Iida responded firmly. Seeing how the brunette approached her, Yayoi Rozu quickly created her loyal shield, which always accompanied her when it came to one-on-one duels. Blinded by her fury, Uraraka did not see the blow coming that Yayoi Rozu would land on her face with the hard metal of her shield, making her bounce back a little. "Enough," said Ida, getting his engine ready. "Leave them," she said, putting a hand on her shoulder. Todoroki. "How can you ask me something again?" He felt another hand on his other shoulder. "This is personal, Four Eyes, you should be the one who understands them best," said Bakugo, referring to the not-so-secret meeting with the hero killer. "Just leave them," Ida. Todoroki spoke again. The president of Class 1 had given in. In the future Ida will know that he did the right thing. "Great party, right?" Izuku broke the ice, laughing a little nervously. "Yes." The black-haired woman responded automatically without even turning to see his friend. "Everyone seems to be enjoying it," said the green-haired man, looking at her with a smile. He agreed even without seeing Yayoi Rozu. An awkward silence formed between them. Yayoi Rozu used those seconds to observe her surroundings. Kayaka and Kaminari shared a tender kiss. Todoroki prevented Hagakure and Ashido from kissing his cheek by heating one side and freezing the other. It was a funny image to see. Hagakure stuck to the ice and Ashido tried to cool his cooked tongue. "Did you finish reading the last book I lent you?" Izuku asked, trying to start a conversation. "Oh yes. Yes. I can give it back to you if you want," the black-haired girl answered nervously again. "That would be great, yes," said the green-haired man. Again an awkward silence. Izuku really thought that his friend would start talking to him about the book and she would give him her opinion, then he would give her his, then they would both start an endless chat and it would all be laughter at the silly theories they both invented, and nothing of that happened. Turning to see her next to him, the boy realized how nervous his friend looked right now. He had never seen her like this, the green-haired man thought. It was as if she had adopted his nervousness. "Are you okay, Yayoi Rozu?" the boy asked, concerned in his tone of voice. "I'm fine. It's just this drink. It seems like it's affecting me a little," the black-haired girl laughed, turning to look at him with a fake smile. "Okay," the green-haired man said, not very convinced. "What did you think of the book?" I asked him, trying to start a conversation. "Very good. I liked it a lot," the black-haired woman faked a smile again. It was already the third time that silence had formed a new record. "So I'm going to go get something to drink," the green-haired man said with a tired and irritated tone. "See you." I guess he got up from the couch. Suddenly the world of Yayoi Rozu began to pass in slow motion. "Good job. You belittled him to the point that you scared him away." His conscience spoke to him. What is he supposed to do? Tell her not to leave and to stay alone so that she continues to behave sharply? Go with him? Explain to him that the reason for her attitude was the incredible attraction she felt for him. It didn't matter, Izuku was her friend, maybe her best friend, and she wasn't going to allow the friendship they both had to be ruined by simple desire. Willing to apologize and fix things, Yayoi Rozu decided to stop her friend. "You can do it. It will be a piece of cake. Easy." Midoriya Todoroki called him first. "You can help yourself from here, I'm leaving." He pointed to the mojito jug. Thank you very much." The boy bowed. "Good night," the boy said goodbye, heading to his room. A little surprised and grateful for Todoroki's intervention, Yayoi Rozu remained silent for a few seconds, watching as her friend poured the drink in front of her. "Okay, now yes." Without interruption. "We're leaving too," Ashido said, stretching, getting up from the couch next to Hagakure. "It was fun." The invisible girl said happily. "Goodbye everyone." She said goodbye. "See you tomorrow, Yayoi Rozu." "Tortolo," she said, looking at Kyoka and the pink-haired Kaminari. "Good night, Hagakure." Ashido. Izuku said goodbye politely with a smile. "I almost forgot." Ashido suddenly remembered. Quickly approaching the green-haired boy, the pink-haired girl stood on tiptoe and grabbed his face so she could steal a kiss on poor Izuku's cheek, which lit up like a lamp instantly. The green-haired man called, completely surprised. "I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. You looked very handsome tonight," the pink-haired girl said mischievously. "See you," she said goodbye, leaving the poor boy hypnotized. "See you," he said, following the pink-haired girl, Izuku, with his gaze. The party was already ending for some, but for a certain black-haired woman with a frown the party was just beginning. Time after. Since the first time they did it, a mystery had arisen for Yayoi Rozu that always made him uncomfortable and strange. "Izuku?" the black-haired girl called. "Wait a moment." The green-haired man responded from his bathroom. It wasn't strange, but it didn't seem to make much sense to him either anyway. All his doubts would be clarified once his friend answered a question. "Okay, what's going on?" the green-haired boy asked, coming out of the bathroom with nothing more than a towel covering him from the waist down. The black-haired woman completely forgot the question, her eyes roamed every centimeter of the boy's body. While his friend stood with her mouth open analyzing every centimeter of the boy's body, it seemed like she was about to drool. Izuku decided to look for his shirt and get ready to leave. It wasn't until she finished dressing that the black-haired woman came to her senses. "Sorry, it's hard to concentrate with so many distractions," Yaoi Rozu said with a smile. "Were you going to ask me something?" The green-haired man reminded her, sitting on the opposite side of his friend's bed. "Oh. I almost forgot," the black-haired woman snapped her fingers. "You weren't a virgin the first time we did it, were you?" she asked without any shame. The boy began to break out in a cold sweat at his friend's question. Stopping halfway through putting on his stockings, Izuku turned to look with a nervous smile at his friend, who looked very calm. Well, the boy spoke, trying to sound calm. "I knew it," the black-haired woman said instantly, kneeling on her mattress to approach her friend. "Really?" the green-haired man asked, surprised but still nervous. "Well, not exactly," the black-haired woman responded, not sure of herself. "Are you upset?" the green-haired man asked, sweating profusely. "To be honest, a little, yeah," said the black-haired girl, taking the green-haired boy by the shoulders, forcing him to lie down on her lap. "How did you find out?" the green-haired man asked her, looking into her eyes. The blush accompanied by a mischievous smile formed on the black-haired girl's face. "Let's just say that your actions gave you away." Yaoi Rozu began to caress her hair. Now it was Izuku's turn to blush. "Does this change anything between us?" the green-haired man asked a little calmer. "I want to know who it was," said the black-haired woman with seriousness on her face. "Is it necessary?" Izuku asked, intimidated. "Totally," said Yaoi Rozu firmly. "Is it a long story?" He tried to get out of the situation. "There are no classes tomorrow," the black-haired woman countered, sounding melodious. "Sigh, wait a minute," she said, getting up from his friend's lap. Once seated, Izuku inhaled and exhaled like he had never done before in his life. Yaoi Rozu only observed his friend's attitude with a smile. Despite everything they had been through together, it seemed Izuku would never stop being who he is. "But details or the green-haired boy asked embarrassedly, returning to his place on his friend's legs. "Surprise me," she responded, resuming her caresses of the boy's hair. "Yaoi Rozu. Do you know Hatsume D from the support department?" the boy began. "Time ago. Maybe I didn't think things through," when the black-haired woman mentally scolded herself. When she agreed to accompany Midoriya to her morning workout, she thought the boy would take her to the high school gym, which was where she normally kept in shape. Instead, the boy had already surprised her. As soon as he left the bedroom, the green-haired boy was already getting ready for his training by putting weights on each of his limbs. Seeing how he could move completely naturally, the naive black-haired girl asked her friend for some weights, which he gave in after so many pleas. Yaoi Rozu developed trauma with weights after that experience. "It was like you were struggling to drag the heaviest object in the world." "I'm so sorry." He rushed to take the weight from his friend. "I'm really sorry." The green-haired man helped him up. "I'm fine," the black-haired girl lied. "I think I saw my life pass through my eyes." She thought, "Was I the one who asked you to use them or not?" She smiled at him. Even so, the green-haired man continued feeling bad. Sighing with a smile, Yaoi Rozu watched as her friend carried the now deadly weights, as if they were holding a book. "You are indeed a strong Midoriya," the black-haired woman thought, feeling a little inferior to the boy. Taking advantage of the fact that her friend was taking her time stretching and warming up, she couldn't help but analyze her friend from head to toe. When did he become so tall? The black-haired girl asked herself in surprise. As she remembered, the boy had always been short, now he was a full head taller than the black-haired girl. That wasn't the only noticeable change that Yaoi Rozu noticed. He must train hard. The black-haired girl couldn't help but think, normally Izuku always wore baggy clothes because he said it was more comfortable. However, now that the green-haired boy was wearing nothing else than a sweatshirt, his physique could be seen in all its glory. It was attractive, the black-haired woman thought. "Do you still want to come with me?" the green-haired man asked, bringing the black-haired girl out of her thoughts. "Ah, yes, if it's no problem." "What was that?" Yaoi Rozu asked herself strangely. It was strange for her to have those kinds of thoughts. "Well then," the green-haired man took a deep breath. "Just let me know if you have any problems, okay?" she said in a worried tone. In her life, Yaoi Rozu had met someone more altruistic than this boy. "Just weights, okay?" the black-haired woman smiled, preparing for anything. But nerves took over the boy. Turning around and bending down enough, the boy stretched out his arms so that he seemed to be inviting her to ride him like a piggyback, something funny from Yaoi Rozu's perspective. "Could you get on my back, please?" he asked with a red face. "Is this part of your training?" the black-haired woman asked, a little confused. "Could you say so?" the green-haired man responded, not sure of himself. "I mean, if I make some effort when I do this," he explained. "Okay then," Yaoi Rozu downplayed. "Just remember that you're not the only one who has to exercise, okay?" He approached the boy to climb on top of him. The moment her hands made contact with her friend's body, she swore for a few seconds that a shock ran through her body. Yaoi Rozu ignored this and continued accommodating herself. "One more thing," Izuku said. At the same time he stood up, held tight, and didn't scream in my hate please, he asked. "What do you mean with?" Before Yaoi Rozu could finish her sentence, Izuku activated his quirk and everything began to move at high speed. Training began. Time after. "You're in love," the blonde above him said in a Machiavellian voice. What? Yaoi Rozu responded, surprised and confused, ceasing her attempts to free herself from her. "I noticed it the moment I saw your eyes." The blonde lifted her face by force, forcing the black-haired woman to look at her. Yaoi Rozu really didn't know what to feel in those moments: fear, surprise, anguish, helplessness, or… "I don't know what you're talking about," the black-haired woman said, trying to hide her fear. "What is this?" the blonde dramatized, covering her mouth with her hand. "Don't you accept your feelings?" she said in a surprised tone. This girl, the black-haired woman thought. It was as if she were reading her mind. There was a possibility that that was her quirk, something that didn't make sense according to the information she had about her. Himiko Toga, former member of the League of Villains, whose quirk Yaoi Rozu was informed was to perfectly take the form of any individual she has blood from. A very useful and dangerous quirk. Someone who did not know the individual she decided to transform into would be an easy victim for the serial killer. "It's useless," the black-haired woman whispered. What are you saying now?" the blonde asked without losing her smile. "The place will be full of professionals in a few minutes, you won't be able to run away." She tried to threaten Yaoi Rozu. "If I were you I would escape." She smiled at him. The black-haired woman's face was hit hard against the hard concrete of the floor, which was not so well maintained. "Don't worry about that, darling," he raised the black-haired girl's now bleeding face again. If she survived so many years alone, it's for a reason. Her smile increased. Yaoi Rozu screamed in pain as she felt how the blonde roughly inserted a syringe into her left arm. She could feel her blood being drawn little by little. Luckily for her, Toga only took what was necessary. "Ready?" the blonde said, as if nothing had happened. "Now why don't you tell me a little about this boy?" She hit his face again on the ground. "You're crazy," Yaoi Rozu gasped, obviously affected by the blood being drawn from her. "Of love," the blonde responded playfully. "If you tell me, I may not kill you or any of them." She turned to look at the group of bodies behind her. This shouldn't have happened, the black-haired woman thought, recapitulating the events. This was by far the worst scenario she had imagined. It was supposed to be a quick and easy capture. She, along with a group of professional heroes, would go to investigate the frequent complaints from neighbors who swear they hear screams of agony in an abandoned building, all declaring that it wasn't some haunted house or something. The style. They were two professionals, and she, an outstanding UA student, would be lying if she said that at the time of the patrol. She did not feel confident that was her mistake. How could they even think that a former member of the League of Villains would be there? They couldn't notice her presence. They couldn't even hear when she got close enough to them to be able to sedate them one by one. They were no match for Toga. Not even she, a UA student, couldn't react in time when she stuck her needle in her forearm, deactivating her quirk and leaving her at the mercy of the sadistic blonde. "If I tell you about him," Yaoi Rozu surrendered. "Will you let us go?" His eyes met hers. "Think he promised," the blonde answered. She had no choice. Maybe if she bought time, someone could come. Anyone, no matter who she was distracted by for a few seconds, would be enough. Izuku mentally named the black-haired girl. Already ready to talk, Yaoi Rozu began to invent what she would say to the blonde. There was no way she was going to give information to someone like her about. Buzz buzz. Her attention was drawn to one of the black-haired woman's pockets. "What is this?" she asked herself, seeing the vibrating pocket. "Oh no. It seems like someone is worried about you." He took the device out of his pocket. "I wonder who it is." He held up the cell phone. "Please don't let it be." The blonde screamed loudly. "So he's the one you admire?" Her voice changed to a higher pitch. "Don't answer." The black-haired woman shouted loudly, losing all fear of the blonde. "Silence please." Once again he hit her against the ground. "I'm going to ask for reinforcements." Her voice changed at the last second. Using all her strength to raise her face against Toga's pressure, Yaoi Rozu managed to see her oppressor out of the corner of her eyes. Her eyes were instantly filled with horror. "Izuku. I need your help. Come to this address quickly," said Toga, now with the appearance of the black-haired girl. The black-haired woman tried to shout, only to be hit again, this time with much more force than the previous times. "Would you mind? I'm on my cell phone right now," he said, covering the cell phone so that Izuku wouldn't hear. "Sniff please," the black-haired woman said with a weak voice. "I'm begging you." Tears began to fall from his eyes. "Don't worry, sweetness." The blonde approached the height of the black-haired girl. "I'll take care of him," she whispered. Far from that place, jumping from roof to roof, Izuku got a chill that ran down his entire spine. "Time ago. You're sleeping with Midoriya, aren't you?" Sayu asked unscrupulously. Off what? Asked, not believing what Yayoi Rozu was hearing. She's almost jammed with her glass of water. So if they are doing it, the young woman said thoughtfully, lowering her gaze a little. But I didn't say anything. The black-haired woman tried to act calm. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Sayu turned to look at him, although I don't think I'm the only one who already knows. I informed her. Relaxing a little, Yayoi Rozu gave a long and tired sigh. It was a matter of time, the black-haired woman thought. As careful as they both were about their getaway to see each other, they were both aware that one or two of their companions were going to find out about the type of relationship they shared. We should never have done it in my room, the black-haired woman thought. In that case, they were both to blame. The heat of the moment had made them act without thinking about the consequences. Luckily for her, apparently none of her classmates were around her at the time. Sayu? Yayoi Rozu called him. How did you realize? She asked, blushing and curious. I've always paid a little more attention to Midoriya than the others, she explained. Surprised by her friend's response, Yayoi Rozu couldn't help but generate a lot of unknowns regarding the way her friend responded to her. Can I ask why? The black-haired woman felt genuinely curious. Sayu sighed and moved a little, feeling uncomfortable. Following her partner's gaze, Yayoi Rozu realized that she was observing Izuku, who was chatting with a smile next to Iida and Uraraka in the dormitory room. Placing one hand on the kitchen counter and the other to support her face, Sayu lowered her gaze. I used to like Midoriya, I reveal. Oh, she said, surprised but calm. Yayoi Rozu, I understand. She suddenly felt uncomfortable. I guess I'm still not completely over it. Sayu continued talking. I felt guilt and sorrow over the black-haired woman. I had no idea she didn't know what else to say. I'm not angry with you. Yayoi Rozu. Sayu turned to see him with a smile. She just returned her smile, feeling better. Even so, said the black-haired woman, because I never, I hope she understood what she was referring to. For Uraraka, she responded, a simple I like you couldn't beat Uraraka, I love you, Sayu explained. I wonder what would have happened if Sayu was in my place and I was in hers. The black-haired woman thought her friend could very well have been the one who currently has the same type of relationship that Izuku and she had. Can I ask you one last thing? Sayu turned to see him. Of course, although Sayu's gaze almost never changes, she could tell that she was serious. Do you love him? I asked, looking into her eyes. Tell him the truth. His conscience spoke to him. Lately Izuku has been acting differently. As if that were not enough, now his encounters were more frequent and she could notice when he was making an effort to be able to please her more. It's not that that's what bothers me. It's annoying, the black-haired woman thought, blushing. Even so, the most common change that she noticed in her friend occurred during her late-night reading. Normally both of them always settled down and gave each other their space to read. Something important to them. Now it was different. Yayoi Rozu noticed when this was more delicate and affectionate with her on the last night of reading they had. When she called him to see a part that she liked in her work, he literally hugged her from behind. Let's say that they both ended up doing something more than sharing their ideas. We agreed that there would be no feelings in the middle, the black-haired woman responded, not sure of her answer. I understand, but you still haven't answered my question. Sayu stared at him. Feeling a little intimidated by her friend's gaze, the black-haired woman began to feel nervous and turned away. His gaze fell on the green-haired boy who was talking animatedly next to the brunette winged by him. Both of them looked happy together. Feeling someone's gaze, Izuku turned to look at the kitchen, meeting that look that caused him so many feelings. Ignoring the face she had, the boy did what he would normally do when his friend was around. He smiled at her. No, I don't love him, Yayoi Rozu responded. Deep inside, where only feelings reign, something broke. Sayu stared at him for a few seconds. The answer sounded legitimate, however, from how she looked when she gave him the answer. I understand, he said with a disappointed tone. Sayu, that means you'll stay by her side no matter what, right? She insinuated. Yayoi Rozu only answered yes, while she still had her gaze glued to the floor. He won't abandon you no matter what path you take, that's Midoriya, Sayu continued. I know, the black-haired woman responded weakly. Well, Sayu walked away. A little good luck with Todoroki, then he left the kitchen, waving goodbye to her. And she was left alone, no one but her and her thoughts. Although she convinced herself again and again that it was the right thing to do, something had changed in her. Yayoi Rozu. The cause of his mixed feelings called from the kitchen entrance. Hello, is something wrong? She asked, still affected by her conversation with Sayu. I wanted to ask you if it would be okay for me to go to your room a little earlier today. The thing is that the green-haired man continued speaking. Yayoi Rozu had stopped listening to him a few seconds ago. Her head and heart wouldn't let her concentrate on anything. She had to get out of there. She had to get away from him. I'm sorry, I don't feel well today. Could we skip this weekend? The black-haired woman asked, faking a smile. She didn't even realize that she had interrupted the boy. A little surprised by her interruption, Izuku felt as if she was uncomfortable or upset. Though his illuminated face gradually faded. "I understand, it will be for next time then," he said, smiling at her, as he always does. "Thank you for understanding, see you around." The black-haired woman withdrew at a hasty pace. "We get better," he managed to say before seeing how she locked herself in her room. "There was no reading Friday next week or the next time after." "I did it," the green-haired man thought, looking at the paper in his hands. He couldn't say a word, it was just what he needed. With this he could finally find a little peace. With this simple piece of paper his problems could finally be put to rest. The past, and start without any distraction, away from it. "Midoriya." His director called him for approximately the third time. "I'm sorry, Director Nedzu, I'm a little happy," the green-haired man said, not sure of himself. "Well, a little bit is strange, if I were you I would be jumping for joy." The rodent climbed onto his desk. Izuku laughed after a long time. "That's the spirit." Midori stopped when he saw the state of his student. "Everything okay, son?" I asked him, worried. Even though tears fell non-stop from his eyes, Izuku couldn't help but feel happy and sad at the same time. "I would have liked him to be here," the green-haired man said melancholy, remembering all the moments he spent with his teacher. "So I let it out soon." Nedzu approached to pat his head. The wound had opened again. All Might was the closest thing Izuku had to a father. He trained him, he inspired him. The bond that united them went from being a simple teacher to a student to one of father and son. I had taught so much. "I'm sure he would be more than proud of you," if his director tried to encourage him. He could imagine the smile and happiness he would have had knowing that his disciple would be the first hero ambassador of UA in different parts of the world. Now not only his country would have an education like his. With Izuku's help, UA could now expand throughout the world. "Can I ask you something, Director Nedzu?" the boy asked, wiping his tears. "Anything for the UA representative," said the rodent with a smile. Taking his time to think about whether what he was about to ask would be the right thing or not, Izuku stood up from his seat and said, "Don't make this public until I leave." Izuku has faced a lot in his life literally. He had fought against monsters, mutants, rebels, villains, assassins, etc. The extraordinary thing about the boy was the courage with which he faced them, no matter how intimidating he looked or what difficult situation he found himself in. Midoriya always managed to defeat his rivals. But if we talk about girls, well. "Seriously, Midoriya, it's like I'm kissing a pillow," they said with a smile. The green-haired man tried to articulate a word, failing miserably. "Normally it's the man who takes the initiative, you know." Hahime laughed, enjoying the situation, her cheeks red, but her smile firm. "Because?" the boy asked himself, not understanding what just happened. Just a few moments ago they were both very normal. She had asked him to undress his torso so that she could take some measurements regarding an experiment she was working on. Izuku, being the innocent boy that he is, he accepted without further ado. It wasn't the first time that she asked him. Things got even stranger when she stared at him with a serious tone for a few seconds, something that was rare for the pink-haired girl, since she was always wearing a smile, no matter what situation she was in. Officially something was happening to the pink-haired girl. When she was still looking at him seriously, she asked him if he considered her attractive. After a blush and an attack of nervousness, the green-haired man ended up admitting with difficulty that, in fact, he considered her cute. Bad answer. "This is my first time too, you know." She brought her face closer to the green-haired man's, putting her finger on his lips. "So let's make it memorable." The pink-haired girl smiled playfully. Again the green-haired boy froze, in the metaphorical sense of course, because literally Izuku was burning inside. How did this happen? He wondered loudly in his mind. The poor guy had come with the intention of having his friend repair her suit, as was customary for them. "Waiting for this quite a bit," the pink-haired woman said between kisses, with an enthusiastic tone. "That?" the green-haired boy shouted internally, trying to reason what her friend had said, although it was very difficult for the green-haired boy to think, with everything the pink-haired boy was making him feel. "What do you mean?" Izuku managed to say it with great difficulty. Stopping her attack, Mei stared into the green-haired man's eyes for a few seconds. It wasn't after a few moments that she moved away from the boy a little, letting him breathe normally. "This is your fault," she revealed with a smile, her breathing heavy. "I don't understand what she said," to the green-haired man breathlessly. "Sigh, you're hot, that's all," the pink-haired girl said quickly, approaching the green-haired boy again to continue her attack. "Ah, wait." The green-haired man tried to stop the pink-haired girl. Unlike the previous times, Mei was surprised to feel how Izuku kissed her back, not as carefully as she did, of course, and took her shoulders so he could pull her a little closer. Knowing where things were headed, she took out a control from her pockets and pointed it at the entrance to her workshop. Pressing the only button that the device had, she heard how the door lock was activated, leaving them both locked in. It wasn't until after 5 minutes of kissing and caressing, the last on May's part, that the young lovers found themselves looking into each other's eyes once again, both full of energy and desire. "You have pretty eyes," the pink-haired girl told him, smiling affectionately at him. "Thank you," the green-haired man spoke, forgetting her shyness. "You know what's coming, don't you?" Hatsum asked, suddenly feeling nervous. "I think so," the green-haired man answered, swallowing hard. "That's enough," said the pink-haired girl, joining her lips with the green-haired man's again. Returning to Izuku and Yaoirozu. "Then May explained to me that the reason for her actions was my constant visits and my constant provocations," the green-haired boy explained, blushing. "Let me guess what Yaoirozu said. You always change in front of her. Isn't that so?" I asked in an obvious tone. The boy just nodded nervously. "That wasn't the last time they did it, was it?" she asked, feeling annoyed. Yaoirozu. Izuku shook his head from side to side, feeling embarrassed. "Sigh, well, that explains everything," the black-haired woman said. Removing her head from her legs, Yaoirozu lay down looking away from the green-haired boy, no longer knowing what to think about her friend. "Are you angry?" the green-haired man asked, knowing that the answer was obvious. "Yes and no," answered the black-haired woman, raising her head a little to respond. "I'm sorry if I made you feel bad." Izuku apologized sadly. Sighing tired but embarrassed, Yaoirozu stood up and turned to look at the boy in front of her. "Izuku," the black-haired girl called him. "Yes," she responded, turning to see the green-haired man. "You're not still meeting with her, are you?" Yaoirozu asked with a worried tone. "No. Not anymore. That was a long time ago, in fact it's been a long time since I even went to her workshop," the green-haired man hurried to explain. Letting out a few giggles, the black-haired girl smiled at the attitude her friend had. There was no way she could think that someone as altruistic as Izuku would be a secret womanizer. At most she could be called someone lucky if one talks between men. "I believe you," said the black-haired woman, taking the green-haired man's face to give him an apologetic kiss for doubting him. Feeling how he kissed her back, Yaoirozu let herself be carried away by the boy, who gently laid her on her bed. Although the black-haired woman didn't say it, she once again felt a spark that was already familiar to her when it made contact with her skin. "One last question," said the black-haired woman before continuing. "Who of the two is better?" She smiled mischievously. Izuku smiled back. "You're going to have to prove it." He was surprised by what the green-haired man responded. Something about Yaoirozu made him gain confidence to say that kind of thing. And that was exactly what the black-haired woman did, she showed it to him. Time after. Izuku was not a spiteful person, much less aggressive and foul-mouthed. Anyone who knew him would say that he was polite and respectful. However, what most characterized the boy was undoubtedly his altruism. The boy simply could not avoid seeing other people suffer and do nothing about it. It was something that his nature did not allow him. The hell with his nature, just like all other people, Izuku was a human. He also felt it was normal for a human being to feel sad, desperate, and in more extreme cases angry. Since Aizawa-sensei is busy, Kirishima spoke energetically. "What do you think if we do a dueling tournament?" I asked jovially. Since it was almost the end of the year, lately the teachers at the academy were busier than ever, sometimes leaving free time for the students. This was one of those cases. "It's not a bad idea," said Tsuyu, speaking first among the group. "Sounds good to me," Todoroki said. I wanted to do something more fun." Ishido spoke a little depressed. Little by little the other members of the class began to accept the Redeed's proposal. Even Iida gave his consent as class president, explaining that the activity would serve to strengthen the ties between classmates. "Deku?" Uraraka called him next to him. "Is everything okay?" I asked worriedly. "It's nothing," she responded with a fake smile. "I'm a little thoughtful, that's all," she lied about. While Kirishima explained the rules and drew numbers to see who would face whom, Izuku kept looking at the black-haired girl who hurt him so much. Squeezing her fists tightly, he noticed how she turned around for a few seconds to meet her gaze, turning around immediately when she noticed how he was watching her. Because? The green-haired man wondered inside, annoyed. After sharing so much together, was it that everything they went through was worth nothing to her? "Well then, let's get started," Kirishima shouted enthusiastically, breaking the green-haired boy out of his thoughts. The group headed to the training camp where they fought as a pair, as villains and heroes in their first year. He didn't know if it was a coincidence or not, but of all the scenarios there were, the place his companions chose was the same one they used in their first meeting, the one in the abandoned building. "Deku, we should go sit down," Uraraka spoke sweetly. He noticed how the boy was tense, but he decided to just keep silent. Normally Izuku was excited when he watched his companions, or any hero in general, perform on the battlefield. It was different this time. Carefully observing each of his companions' movements, the green-haired man found himself destructively criticizing himself, how they could have done better, something totally different from how he usually analyzed a hero. Deku, we are friends, no? Uraraka asked. Friends do they could help each other. He spoke, not being able to stand seeing his friend like this. The green-haired man was about to respond in the same way as the first time, however, Kirishima beat him to it. Midoriya. The Redeed called him. It's your turn, brother. I informed him. We'll talk about this later, okay? He told him before leaving. The green-haired man didn't even turn around to tell him. Leaving an extremely worried brunette in the stands, Izuku walked at a leisurely pace to the battlefield, stretching and preparing for his duel. The green-haired man was tempted to turn to see Aoi Rozu when he passed by her. He decided that he would not bother her with another failed attempt to speak. Don't hold back, Midoriya, because I won't do it, said Zero determinedly, finishing stretching in front of him. I don't have time for this, the green-haired man said mentally, clenching his fists tightly and taking a stand to fight. Izuku did something he wasn't used to doing when he faced someone. He put on his hood. Start, Kirishima shouted. Zero's attack was quick but predictable. The black-haired man tried to attract the green-haired boy in the same way that he faced Todoroki at the sports festival of his first year. Unlike Todoroki, Izuku didn't even give the poor raven-haired man a chance. Taking both ribbons tightly, the green-haired boy was the one who ended up dragging the black-haired boy with just a little force from his quirk. The way in which he pulled the ribbon allowed him to prepare for any counterattack the black-haired boy tried to make. Zero didn't have time to react. Opening his arms as much as he could, Izuku only had to wait for the right moment to be able to imprison the black-haired man with his arms, who could not prevent anything that the green-haired boy had planned. Once in his arms, Izuku didn't even need his quirk to make the black-haired boy give up due to the force with which he was squeezing him, leaving the poor man almost out of breath. Midoriya wins, said Kirishima, surprised by the speed at which the match ended. Everyone present was surprised by the way in which he had defeated him, something ironic if you took into account that Zero's quirk was basically to leave someone captive or squeeze them. The entire class was even more surprised when the green-haired boy dropped the black-haired boy, as if nothing had happened, leaving him lying on the floor desperately trying to catch his breath, something totally unusual for the altruistic green-haired boy. Deku, the brunette in the stands, mentioned worriedly. Like her, a certain black-haired girl couldn't help but have the green-haired boy in her thoughts. Izuku on the other hand only felt anger and emptiness. Let's continue with the duels, Kirishima said, a little subdued, surprised like the others. Little by little, the tournament was forgotten, now becoming a free-for-all against Midoriya. At first everyone took it as a simple challenge to see who could be the one to defeat the green-haired man. They should not have underestimated him. The way Izuku defeated his teammates was incorrect, and it even seemed that the boy did it on purpose, just to discredit his opponent. Ioka, stunned by a sound wave caused by a slap from the boy's quirk, Iida outspeeded and immobilized in a matter of seconds. I give up, said Fumikage without further ado, turning his back on the green-haired man. I'm not going to fight with you in the state you're in. He withdrew without saying more. Izuku used all his strength not to slam his partner into the ground or send him flying with a single blow. No one wanted to fight him anymore. Even the green-haired man could notice how Shido trembled a little when he had to face him. It was enough to immobilize her on the ground for him to surrender. I can see that you are upset, Midoriya said Todoroki, standing in front of the boy for his turn with him. I'm not, the green-haired man said behind his mask. I hope your mood doesn't make you make a mistake. He prepared to attack the boy. I hope you're ready for what's coming. The green-haired man also got ready. See, you can start, he said, no longer sure how the Kirishima duel would end. Without wasting any second, Todoroki froze the entire ground, hoping that the attack would immobilize the green-haired boy, which did not happen. Izuku had already anticipated the attack by jumping high above the ground. Trying not to give him time to think, Todoroki began to throw flames at him without caring that they were roasting the green-haired boy. Once again, Izuku only had to fall with momentum to the ground to be able to avoid, and at the same time take his opponent off balance with the earthquake that this provoke. DSK Todoroki snapped, annoyed and irritated, seeing that none of his attacks had any effect. Izuku only had to take a big leap to end up on his side. Before the green-haired boy could land a blow, Todoroki covered himself with a huge pillar of fire, preventing Izuku from hitting him. This did not stop the green-haired boy. Moving away a little, Izuku delivered a blow strong enough to disperse the flames of his partner. As soon as they had been completely extinguished, Izuku was already running in his direction to end the duel. It's not going to be that easy, said Todoroki, covering himself with a layer of ice, thick enough to withstand one of his blows. Letting out a grunt of annoyance, the green-haired man concentrated his energy on one of his fists and destroyed the layer of ice with one blow. Todoroki flew in the opposite direction to the green-haired boy, crashing against a nearby wall. He spat out a little blood while he barely got up. "Give up," the green-haired man said in front of him, ready to finish off the boy. Without answering him, Todoroki tried to distract him with a flare with one of his hands, but it was useless. Izuku only had to take his arm and direct the flare to the side of his face, avoiding any burn. Before Todoroki could freeze his hand, Izuku kneed him hard in the pit of his stomach, knocking him unconscious. "Todoroki!" Kirishima shouted, scared by what had happened to him. Like Kirishima, the other members of the class looked out from the stands with concern. Once the Redeed arrived next to the greenhead and the unconscious Todoroki, he couldn't help but feel anger at Midoriya's actions. "What's your problem?" he asked, facing the green-haired man. "I just want to finish this," Izuku answered without even turning to see him. "This was totally unnecessary, this is not how a man should act," he yelled at her as he helped Todoroki up. "Midoriya, the injured boy," said, getting out of Kirishima's grip, he began to approach him slowly. Unfortunately, the boy could not take more than 2 steps before falling unconscious again. This time Kirishima prevented him from falling to the floor. "I think that's enough duels for today." The Redeed looked at him annoyed. "I hope you're happy." Midoriya walked past him with his partner in his arms. Izuku didn't move, his fists hurt, and his head was a mess. The anger inside him seemed to want to disappear, but he could still feel the adrenaline and the strength it gave him. It was something new for him. "Deku!" Bakugo roared from the stands. "Fight with me, Deku!" He challenged him, coming down from the stands with the help of his quirk. Izuku smiled knowing that it was what he needed to be able to lower his stress and anger a little. Time ago. The topic of the last sleepover had left Yaoirozu very thoughtful. "Can I really give myself the pleasure of having a relationship?" the black-haired girl asked herself. Ashido had made a good point by highlighting that now that the villains were no longer a major danger, they could enjoy their youth a little. "Sigh, this is worse than a physical test," said the black-haired woman, tired of thinking the same thing every day. "If for some reason I decided to have a relationship," the black-haired woman began to think, who would it be with? She asked herself, already knowing the answer. It was not a very secret the feelings she had for Todoroki, her classmates often enjoyed bothering her with it. However, Yaoirozu never thought that Todoroki could see her as a possible partner. The boy only had eyes for his responsibilities and nothing else. Unlike her, Todoroki had had to live a hard life since he was born. She, on the other hand, had been someone privileged since she could remember. If they both had something in common, it was the economic part, just that. "I think that's the only thing we have in common," the black-haired girl said a little sadly. She didn't know him well enough to be able to approach him and talk to him naturally, nor had she done anything noticeably friendly with him in simple words. Both of them were nothing more than acquaintances. That was the truth. The fact that Yaoirozu admired him to the point of having feelings for him did not mean that he felt the same way. "That reminds me," said the black-haired woman. "Did Todoroki have any real friends?" It was true that he hung out with the others in the other activities and that he was normally understandable and courteous to everyone. However, she had never seen him hang out with someone frequently enough to consider him a friend. "That's it." The black-haired woman remembered, getting up from her bed suddenly. If there was anyone Todoroki normally hung out with or often accompanied, Midoriya. She remembered the black-haired girl. How had she not thought about it before? She wondered. It was the green-haired boy who managed to get the cold and the unmovable Todoroki to open up a little with the others, not to mention that it was thanks to him that he accepted his father's quirk. But the black-haired woman said, lying down again. "There is a problem," she said mentally. Just like with Todoroki, Yaoirozu had almost never exchanged words with the green-haired boy. It wasn't that she didn't like him, she simply never had the opportunity to know the green-haired boy deeply. He had his group, so to speak. "If I want to get closer to Todoroki, first I'll have to talk to Midoriya," the black-haired woman said determinedly, coming to the conclusion that this was the only way to approach Todoroki. "I can't believe he's paying attention to Ashido," the black-haired woman thinks, disappointed in herself. The next day. Luckily for Yaoirozu, Midoriya was one of the first to arrive to class with her, although to be honest, they were always the two who arrived the earliest to the classroom, much to Iida's disgrace. "Midoriya," the black-haired woman called from her seat. The green-haired man was a little surprised. "Is something wrong, Yaoirozu?" he asked respectfully. "Are you talking to Todoroki?" the black-haired girl asked, a little embarrassed. Well, the green-haired man found himself thoughtful. "Yes. I guess." It sounded more like a question. Brightening up and feeling more confident, Yaoirozu got up from her seat and sat behind the green-haired boy, who jumped a little. "Could you tell me about him?" he asked, giving the green-haired boy his full attention. But the green-haired man asked, confused. "You said you knew him, didn't you? Could you tell me a little about him?" she asked again, feeling a little nervous. "But why me? And wouldn't it be better to talk to him?" The green-haired man asked, a little surprised and nervous. Cursing the green-haired boy's curiosity, the black-haired girl began to think about the possibilities she had to respond to the boy. Should she tell him? She wondered internally, if she decided to confess to him about the plan she had to get close to Todoroki, Midoriya might have a better idea of what information she would give him. Can you keep a secret? The black-haired woman said quietly, despite the fact that there were only the two of them in the living room. I'm okay. The green-haired man sounded unsure again. Once she told her, she was surprised to see how it was Midoriya who felt embarrassed and blushed instead of her. She couldn't help but laugh a little at his attitude. Things developed a little faster than Yaoyorozu thought they would. Apparently, if Midoriya knew enough about Todoroki, the black-haired woman was tempted to take out a pen and paper to write down everything her classmate told her. Again, Yaoyorozu giggled when she saw how Midoriya took out his characteristic notebook with the information of all the heroes he knew, including her. She felt a little more comfortable seeing how her partner laughed like her because of how he left her. You really like to write things down, don't you? I asked, forgetting the topic of black-haired Todoroki. It's a bad custom, haha. The green-haired man laughed nervously, but with a smile. I also write down a lot of things when I read, and I'm not saying it's a bad habit, the black-haired woman revealed, taking out an elegant and luxurious notebook. Really? The green-haired man said, surprised. I also took notes when I read. He scratched the back of his neck, a little embarrassed. Do you read? The black-haired girl asked him, genuinely curious. What do you read? She looked directly at him. Well, a little of everything, I guess, the green-haired man answered. What do you read about Yaoyorozu? He asked curiously. The black-haired woman's face lit up like never before, and a smile formed instantly, accompanied by a sparkle in her eyes. Where do I start? Said the black-haired woman animatedly. It was not until his other classmates arrived that Yaoyorozu stopped talking. The entire class spent the entire class thinking about whether he had forgotten to tell the green-haired boy some work, who had surprised him by revealing that of the entire list that he recited to him, the Pella Negra, this one had read several of the ones I mentioned. Completely forgetting the topic of Todoroki, Yaoyorozu ended up accompanying the boy during recess, lunchtime, and even when he went out to the dormitories, with the sole purpose of chatting with him about the different stories they had both read, sometimes debating about something, others laughing, remembering funny parts of the books they read. Their roommates were surprised to see how they both stayed late in the living room, chatting next to a stack of books. It wasn't just the reading that they both ended up identifying with, apparently they both liked the same pop band. Izuku had to admit it quietly. Yaoyorozu couldn't help but let out a cry of excitement upon hearing his friend's revelation. Finally, Yaoyorozu decided to return the green-haired boy's intimate secret, revealing to him that she secretly wrote novels. Izuku forced her to bring some examples after she revealed such a secret to him. Even though all the lights were off in the bedrooms, a small lamp was enough for these two to continue laughing and chatting as if they had known each other for a lifetime. Yaoyorozu had found a new friend. Some time later. Hey Sato. Kaminari called from the armchair. Could you put a romantic one? He asked with a smile. I don't know, friend, it's not my style, he answered, a little dissatisfied with what the blonde was asking of him. Please? Kyoka asked sweetly, trying to convince the boy. Okay, the brunette relented. Playing a slow and romantic song for the couple. Yaoyorozu wanted to curse the couple in front of her, although a part of her said otherwise. Here she was, next to the boy who had her crazy these last few days. So the green-haired man spoke. Drawing courage from who knows where, the black-haired woman turned to look at the boy while he was drinking his mojito. Ashido was right, she said mentally. Izuku had really shined tonight. The boy was wearing a white t-shirt, a little tight for him. Discomfort of the black-haired woman, and a plaid shirt on top, jeans that combined perfectly with what was already mentioned. You look good, the black-haired woman said nervously. Thank you, the green-haired man smiled. Uraraka helped me by choosing clothes, she explained. I saw the black-haired woman speak, thanking and cursing Uraraka for dressing him so well. Yaoyorozu, the green-haired boy called, leaving his glass to concentrate on the black-haired girl. Is everything okay? I mean, you've been different these last few days. He looked into her eyes. Wish. Well, I tried to explain what the black-haired woman was feeling. Turning to look at the boy, she noticed how close their faces were. The demused Ursello. Prove it to him. The black-haired girl thought. She felt hypnotized by the green-haired boy's eyes. As if she were under a spell, the black-haired girl began to bring her face closer to the green-haired boy, no longer caring if her actions could destroy the friendship she had with her friend. Hey. Hick, a drunk Bakugo shouted. What do you think you're doing? Hick, the blonde pointed out. Feeling how her world was falling into pieces, Yaoyorozu slowly turned around with a horrified face to see who the blonde was pointing at. I ruined it, thought the black-haired woman, exaggerating things. She began to imagine the worst scenarios that would happen to her in the future. Jealous Bakugo? Kaminari responded with an egocentric smile. Go hick to do your stupid things in a hotel. Damn indecent hick, complained the annoyed blonde. Don't talk to my friends like that, hick, Fumikid shouted, annoyed, using his shadow to grab the blonde and take him out of the dorms. Do you want to fight, heck little dove? I use his explosions to free the blonde. Fight. The others shouted, even Uraraka, who suddenly woke up and began to encourage the two who seemed to fight more against their own balance. It was close, the black-haired woman thought in relief, completely forgetting the situation she was in. You look good too, the winged green-haired man spoke. Remembering what she was about to do, the black-haired girl felt her nerves take over again. Fixing her gaze on the green-haired boy, the black-haired girl could notice how her friend's face had turned an intense red. Could it be that? I'm sorry, Izuku, the black-haired girl apologized sadly. The reason why I've been acting strange is because she prepared to speak. She felt how the green-haired man took her hand, something they had done before, but this time it felt comforting, it felt warm. It's you, the black-haired girl finished saying, tightening her grip on the green-haired boy's hand. Unlike the first attack by the black-haired girl, this time she could notice how Izuku also leaned his face to kiss the black-haired girl. It was just a rose at first, something innocent and new for Yaoi Rozu, it felt good, she thought. The second time she was there, she felt her friend's hands on her waist, bringing her closer while she intensified her kiss, something that surprised the black-haired woman. Letting herself go, Yaoi Rozu wrapped her arms around the green-haired boy's neck, bringing him as close as possible to her. Never in her life would the black-haired girl have imagined that someone with a face as innocent as Izuku would be completely dominating the kiss they shared. The kisses began to become long and passionate. The black-haired woman did not remember the moment in which the green-haired man ended up on top of her, but she cared little. If it weren't for the fact that they both needed oxygen, they wouldn't have separated even if a villain had appeared. Do you want to go somewhere else? The green-haired man asked her between gasps. He never stopped looking into the black-haired woman's eyes. Yes, the girl responded in the same way. The pair headed towards the black-haired girl's room, their hands never leaving each other. As if they were a couple. This will only be once, right? The black-haired girl asked nervously, in front of the door to her room. I guess, the green-haired man answered, turning her friend around delicately. Their gazes met. The desire completely took over them. The green-haired man literally put Yaoi Rozu against the wall, or in this case door. The girl was surprised to feel how her friend's lips were directed to her neck and not to her lips. That's it. To leave a mark, the black-haired girl thought, feeling with great pleasure how he sucked her skin hard. Her legs began to fail as Izuku continued with his attack. As if he could read her mind, the boy lifted her enough so that now they were both at the same height and… "Hey?" said a voice near them. Yaoi Rozu. Midoriya. Mineta mentioned to them, with his eyes half closed. The pair froze, the sound of their gasps the only thing heard in the hallway. Gosh. I really need to go to sleep, yawn, I'm already hallucinating, Mineta spoke, opening his room and getting into it without saying more. The heat of the moment had made them forget that they were not yet inside the black-haired girl's room. It was close, said the pair in unison. Yaoi Rozu began to look for her key from her pockets. She hit her forehead hard when she remembered that she had left them inside. Putting it aside, Izuku used his quirk to literally destroy the lock on her door and open it from inside. As if he were going to solve something, the green-haired man replaced the destroyed lock once inside. Izuku thanked the heavens that the black-haired girl's quirk was creating things, since if it hadn't been for her, they both could have ended up being young parents. Just for tonight, no? He asked while the green-haired boy undressed. I'm starting to have my doubts, the black-haired woman said with a mischievous smile, climbing onto his bed while inviting his friend to accompany him. That without a doubt was not the last time. When Izuku arrived at the address that his friend had given him, he couldn't help but think that something was really wrong. He could feel it. It was that sixth sense that made him be alert at all times, because if he was neglected even for a few seconds the consequences could be fatal. Hello? Uraraka. The green-haired man called with his cell phone. Deku? Is Yaoi Rozu okay? The brunette asked, already knowing the situation. I haven't entered the place yet, he said, looking skeptical at the building. I have a bad feeling about this. He spoke in a helpless tone. Maybe you should wait for us all to arrive, she said, worried about the green-haired brunette. Maybe she's fine. You don't have to go in alone, she tried to persuade him. He's right, the green-haired man thought. Yaoi Rozu was someone completely capable of handling this type of case. He trusted her, however. I'm sorry, the green-haired man said before hanging up, turning off his cell phone and preparing to enter. He had to make sure she was okay. The black-haired woman had become someone very important to him. They had both shared so much in such a short time. It was more than just a relationship of friends with benefits, although Izuku still had a little doubt about his feelings towards him. Friend, the truth is that this has already occupied a place in your heart for some time now. "Please," Izuku said out loud, moving from one side to the other, walking around the building, making sure there were no traps. The place was clear, there was nothing strange or dangerous nearby, something that the green-haired man missed a lot, which made him increase his guard even more. Deactivating his quirk, the boy took a deep breath before entering the building through one of the many entrances it had, preparing for whatever was coming. "It's dark," the green-haired man said mentally, cursing his luck for not bringing some lighting with him. Having poor vision would make things difficult for the boy later on. As he entered the building, the more the green-haired man began to lower his guard, no sound could be heard other than his breathing. Desperation began to affect the green-haired man. What if they kidnapped her? He began to think, worried and nervous, because of how the idea was going it could become a possibility. Without wasting any more time, the boy activated his quirk to move quickly. It was much more difficult to see things around him when he moved at high speed, yet he did not stop. His heart was squeezed when he managed to spot a red and black dot lying on the floor in the distance. It increased its speed and skidded to a stop just to end up in front of the body he suspected was his friend. Yaoi Rozu. He bent down to see how she was. He lifted her a little in her arms to see if she was hurt. Izuku sighed in relief when he saw that she was unharmed. While shaking her to wake her up, the green-haired man couldn't help but feel that his friend felt different. She smelled different even through her suit. He could notice how different she felt in his arms, adding the strange fact that she was unharmed. Izuku began to carefully analyze the black-haired girl in his arms. "Izuku?" his friend called almost in a whisper. "Thank heaven you came," the black-haired woman smiled, taking him by the neck to give him a hug. "What happened?" she asked, not really understanding what the green-haired boy was going through. "Where is the villain?" she continued questioning. "I'm escaping," she said, still hugging him tightly. "I was very scared." Sniff. Izuku began to tear up. Feeling how she slowly removed one of her hands from his neck, Izuku activated his quirk instantly and knocked the girl to the ground, holding each of her limbs tightly, preventing her from any type of movement. She squealed, surprised and ecstatic. "The black-haired one. You." The green-haired man shouted angrily, recognizing who he was dealing with. "Where is Yaoi Rozu?" he asked him furiously. "What nonsense are you saying?" Izuku. The black-haired girl looked into his eyes. "Am I here or not?" she asked calmly. "Where is he?" the green-haired man shouted, losing his patience. A chill ran down the young man's spine. "I can replace her, Izuku. She doesn't deserve you," the girl said with a sadistic smile. "Someone as pathetic as her can't be by your side." The black-haired woman brought her face closer. Izuku couldn't help but feel scared. This wasn't the first time he had faced Toga. Apparently every time the League of Villains made an attack against them, the blonde always ended up concentrating on him. However, all of their encounters, without a doubt this was the one that would mark the boy the most. The deranged face that she made, accompanied by the desperate attempts that she made to break free from his grip, it was terrifying if not traumatizing. "Just give me one chance, I'll show you." The blonde brought her face even closer to Izuku. She called him now with her true voice. Fear paralyzed him, seeing how it little by little began to take its true form, increasing how bizarre and chilling everything looked. Toga took advantage of that moment to try to bite the green-haired boy's face. As if it were a shark trying to catch a bait in the air, the boy managed to avoid the bite. However, doing this made him lean a little, loosening his grip. "And the blonde. I got you," the blonde said with her normal appearance. Managing to free one of her hands, Toga took one of the dozens of knives that were there. Without even hesitation, the blonde took advantage of the time that the green-haired boy used to activate his quirk again. The girl tried to stick her knife into the boy's neck, missing by just a few centimeters. "Blows," the green-haired man said, panting from a distant column. "It's my turn to get up, Izuku," he said, the blonde getting up from the floor, taking out a huge knife hidden under his sleeves. "Focus," the green-haired man said to himself, activating his quirk again to face the blonde. "Here I go," said Toga, starting to run in the direction of the green-haired boy. Once again fear took over Izuku. The sensation was such that the boy couldn't move his legs, he couldn't even breathe properly. He had to move, or else Toga would finish him off with a thin but lethal thrust. You have to remember why the green-haired man had come, managing to find determination and courage. "Save her," Izuku roared, surprising the blonde in front of him. Before Toga took another step, the green-haired man was already in front of her. With a clean and quick blow to the stomach, the green-haired man left the blonde breathless. "Izuku," said while the blonde tried not to fall. Her legs began to tremble and she fell unconscious, but not before showing her terrifying smile to the green-haired man, even after such a blow. Breathing heavily, Izuku let himself fall to calm down for a while. "It was harder than I thought," he thought. The boy carried the girl on one of his shoulders and continued searching for him, now at a faster pace, knowing that there would be no more threats nearby. And then he found her behind a piece of wood next to two other bodies. She was bleeding. The boy threw the blonde away from her, not wanting her near her. With the grinding of his teeth and her trembling hands, Izuku hugged the battered Yaoi Rozu in her arms and then cried. The sirens of the ambulances and the police were responsible for covering the roars that the green-haired man let out. The next morning, the small rays of sunlight passing through her window woke up the hospitalized black-haired woman. She grunted a little as she felt a stinging pain in her bandaged head. Getting up heavily, Yaoi Rozu began to slowly remember the events of the previous night and the patrol captured Izuku. Opening her eyes wide, the black-haired woman started to look for the green-haired boy, worried that he had fallen victim to Toga's trap. Unfortunately for her, a sick woman heard the noises she was making while she was trying to get up. Taking advantage of her failed attempt to look for the green-haired boy, Yaoi Rozu asked the nurse if something had happened to her friend. "The boy is fine, he was here a while ago, he said he would return later to visit her," the patient explained with a comforting smile. Letting out a sigh of relief, Yaoi Rozu decided to listen to the nurse by lying down on her bed to rest. Some time later things got a little more chaotic in the black-haired girl's room. His parents arrived and gave him a huge hug accompanied by hundreds of incoherent questions. Already becoming accustomed, her classmates were the next to visit her, except for Izuku, who repeated the action of their parents, but with a little less delicacy than Izuku arrived. "Hello," the black-haired girl greeted him nervously, not even understanding the reason for her nervousness. The green-haired boy did not answer him, he simply surrounded the black-haired man with his arms and began to ask for forgiveness for no reason. Yaoi Rozu remained static for a few seconds, not really understanding what was happening with her friend. Even so, she returned the hug with just as impetus as this one. "It's okay," the black-haired woman said in a delicate voice. "I'm fine." She smiled in the hug. "Don't lie to me," said the green-haired man, taking her by the shoulders to look into her eyes. "I know you're not well." She blames her tone of voice. The black-haired woman looked down, trying to hide the fear and sadness that she had inside. Her encounter with the blonde had been the closest thing to a nightmare in real life. Yaoi Rozu was scared. "I was afraid, Izuku," the black-haired woman said with a broken voice, covering her face in an attempt to stop the tears that were beginning to fall. Without thinking twice, Izuku hugged her again, unlike the first time. He had the confidence to caress his friend's hair. He didn't care that someone came in and saw them in such a way, much less the fact that his friend was soaking his polo shirt. He just wanted to comfort her, let her know that he was there for her. Why Izuku loved her. Time after, Yaoi Rozu felt as if her heart was going to explode from how fast it was beating, and it was not an exaggeration, because being thousands of meters above the ground without any protection other than the grip she had on her friend's neck was something that would be scary. Even the coldest of men. "My Midoriya," the black-haired girl called, scared. "Put me down. Put me down." She screamed desperately, tightening her grip on the green-haired man's neck. Okay," she said, feeling how it was suffocating her. "I didn't think she had that much strength," the green-haired man thought, surprised. Looking for a safe place to land, the green-haired boy concentrated a little more strength on his feet to be able to land properly, despite the pain caused by his friend's screams. "Are you okay?" the green-haired boy asked nervously, landing on top of one of the buildings near the high school. "Yaoi Rozu?" he called, seeing that she still hadn't gotten off his back. "Wait a minute," the black-haired woman said, panting, trying to recover from the second trauma that he had developed in less than a morning. "I can take you back if you want," the green-haired man offered, feeling bad. "I'm fine. Let's finish this," the black-haired girl said determinedly, approaching the green-haired boy so he could climb on her back. Closing his eyes tightly, Yaoi Rozu managed to overcome the enormous jumps that his friend made from roof to roof without having to scream or choke the green-haired boy. "And we're here," the green-haired man informed her, bending down so that his friend could get down. The smell of salt and the sound of the sea caused the black-haired woman to open her eyes suddenly, carefully getting off her friend's back. She couldn't help but smile at such a portrait in front of her. The sun was beginning to rise in the distance, illuminating the crystalline sea next to the colorful sand of the beach. It was beautiful. "The beach?" Yaoi Rozu asked, confused and surprised, coming to her senses. "Do you train here?" The black-haired girl turned to look at him. "Yes," she answered, looking at the horizon at the green-haired man in the same way. "Why this place?" the black-haired girl asked curiously. A sad and nostalgic expression formed on the green-haired man's face. "This was where he trained me," he said, looking down. "Who?" she asked, a little surprised by the change in attitude of her friend. All might, the green-haired man turned to see him, determination and pain in her eyes. It was the first time that Yaoi Rozu had seen the boy's face closely in all these years. It had indeed changed, the black-haired woman thought, admiring the air of maturity that he transmitted, augmented by the new face that he possessed. She couldn't help but think that Izuku looked very good. "I had no idea that he was the one who trained you," the black-haired girl said, a little surprised and embarrassed. Remembering the whole one for all thing, Izuku started to sweat nervously. I mean, oh, from time to time we used to meet in this place, and well, the green-haired man tried to make up an excuse. He's still Midoriya after all, the black-haired woman thought with a smile, watching as he struggled to find the right terms. I understand, you don't have to explain to me, Midoriya. He tried to calm the boy down. How about we start doing some exercise? The black-haired girl began to warm up. Yes. Let's start. The green-haired man answered nervously, throwing himself to the floor like a soldier to start doing push-ups. Laughing a little at his friend's attitude, Yaoyorozu began to imitate the green-haired man. He would soon regret it. 30 minutes later. Exhausted, there was no other way to express how tired and sore Yaoyorozu felt, unlike a hyperactive and energetic winged green-haired girl of hers. It's not necessary to imitate me, Yaoyorozu, the green-haired man said, smiling nervously. It takes time to get the rhythm, he informed me. Everything hurts, the black-haired woman responded in a low voice, lying on her back on the soft sand. The green-haired man laughed a little sadly. He was now going for 100 push-ups with one arm. How can you do this daily? Yaoyorozu barely tried to get up. This is horrible. She managed to hold herself up tremblingly. It's a matter of discipline, he answered as he changed arms. Can we go back? I felt like I could vomit as the black-haired woman began to change color. Give me a few minutes, the green-haired man asked, getting up. Okay, the black-haired woman held her stomach, trying to stop his intense suffering. The green-haired man sighed and inhaled deeply. After a few seconds, his calm and relaxed expression changed to a serious and determined one, once again surprising the black-haired wing near him. Wow, the black-haired woman said with her mouth open, watching how her friend moved at high speed and performed hard exercises in a matter of seconds. 15 or 20 minutes of pure exercise passed without rest for the green-haired man. Yaoyorozu just watched all that time, not being able to believe what he saw. Okay, we can go, the green-haired man said tiredly, lying down next to the black-haired woman and then showing her his back. You should rest a little, the black-haired woman recommended, saying it more because she didn't want to get wet with the boy's sweat. It's okay, the green-haired man accepted without arguing, taking off his shirt to let his body breathe. Yaoyorozu, of course, had no choice but to enjoy the show. Relax. You've seen worse things. She tries to maintain her composure. The fact that the green-haired boy was always reserved about his physical appearance made him twice as attractive to the black-haired girl, who did not take her eyes off of his friend. As time passed, the pair became closer and closer to each other, which Yaoyorozu liked. However, since that day they both went to train, which was not just a one-time thing, a small feeling which the black-haired girl ignored him at first. He began to get bigger and more annoying when he was with the green-haired boy. Yaoyorozu began to feel attracted to the boy. Time after, Izuku had accepted his feelings for Yaoyorozu. This had changed the boy for the better, worrying more about his appearance every time he met with his friend, becoming more gentlemanly and gentle, trying to make his friend laugh more. Everything that any man in love would do to win the heart of his beloved. However, his love did not justify the enormous amount of bags of clothes that he had to carry for her. We should do this more often. The black-haired girl in front of him said happily, jumping around with joy. Yes, she laughed, hiding her tiredness with a smile. The green-haired man. Next time we'll go buy clothes for you, okay? He stopped halfway to see the black-haired boy. Okay, she responded, relaxing a little at how happy her friend looked. Thank you, Izuku, the black-haired woman thanked him, looking into his eyes with a shine that hypnotized the green-haired man. For everything she said it from the heart. There it was, that was the reason why the green-haired boy had fallen for the black-haired girl, that smile that only she knew how to give, expressing the strong bond of friendship that the pair had formed. Izuku wondered how he couldn't have fallen in love with the girl before. Releasing her bags without caring what was going to happen to them, the green-haired man pulled her friend into her arms and then kissed her with all the love he felt for her, even though she didn't know it. Yaoyorozu was a little surprised by the boy's sudden action, knowing that her friend was embarrassed by displays of affection in public. It's not like they were a couple either. She accepted the kiss without complaints, and immediately, the world around her eye went into the background. This always happened every time they both wanted to feel the other, but this time she felt different. The black-haired girl could feel something more, a warm feeling that the green-haired boy transmitted to her. She felt like love. Immediately separating from the boy, Yaoyorozu found herself surprised by the unexpected idea in her head. Seeing Izuku's equally surprised eyes, she decided to ignore her ridiculous thoughts. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to me, the black-haired woman said with a sad smile. Okay, let's go. The smiling green-haired man indicated, clearly more motivated than before. Yes, he responded, feeling how the green-haired man took him by one hand and with the other he carried the amount of bags, as if it were nothing. That feeling again, Yaoi Rozu thought, looking closely at their clasped hands. The black-haired girl's brain began to work at 1,000 per hour in the face of the new dilemma that was presented to her. Would it be wrong? The relationship they both had was not formal at all. They had even decided to keep it a secret, as some kind of forbidden love. Even so, anyone who saw them together would think that the two were a couple, given how happy they looked together. But things were not like that. The morning after that night they both shared at the end-of-year party. Both had agreed not to put feelings in the way of the relationship they would have, since Yaoi Rozu still felt something more than admiration for Todoroki. Izuku didn't feel anything either. As strong as love for the black-haired girl back then. But things changed. Yaoi Rozu could tell the small and innocent crush he had on Todoroki had ended. His relationship with Izuku had made him mature and see things in a different way. His life became more active, and his heart knew it. It was his head that kept telling him that it wasn't a good idea, that things were better the way they are now, and being the good brain that she is, Yaoi Rozu preferred to listen to his mind. And then the problems came. Time after. He had waited so long for this moment. Since the day his friend developed his quirk, he had wanted to face him and emerge victorious, and today he would finally achieve it. Without taking his eyes off the blonde in front of him, Izuku activated his quirk, releasing an incredible pressure near him. "I'm going to use it all," he said mentally. "Can you feel it, can't you, Deku?" the blonde provoked him. "That fury that makes you stronger uses it against me." He charged against the green-haired man. "Wait, Bakugo," Kirishima shouted, trying to stop him. At the same time an enormous pressure passed near him, leaving a trail of dust and dirt in place of the green-haired boy. The two rivals met face to face in the middle of their journey. Bakugo tried to kill Deku with a powerful explosion in his face. Izuku easily dodged it by doing a pirouette to end up behind the blonde. Once well positioned, the green-haired threw a blow without measuring his strength much at the blonde, who managed to dodge the attack by propelling himself with an explosion. "Should we let them fight?" Uraraka asked worriedly from the stands. "If I see that one of the two attempts against the life of the other, I will not hesitate to interfere," Iida said with an authoritarian air. Both boys were at it for several minutes. Between attack and counter-attack, neither had landed a hit. Bakugo had great reflexes, and Izuku was not very fast when he used all his power. It wasn't until the green-haired man took just a breath to rest that the blonde took the opportunity to create an explosion in the face of his opponent. The green-haired boy's mask fell apart, and Class 1 felt a great chill when they saw the face that he was hiding all this time. Hachin roared, not sounding like Izuku himself. His brow could not be furrowed any further, and his mouth seemed unable to close, showing an unfriendly expression. Yaoi Rozu didn't flinch one bit, unlike the rest of the class. "I'm not done yet," the blonde said, pointing with his trigger Deku. He roared, releasing the enormous explosion without fearing the consequences. Concentrating his anger, the green-haired man launched a blow so strong that it was his own power that was responsible for disappearing and dispersing his rival's explosion. Not believing what he saw, the blonde froze in place for a few seconds. It was at that moment that the green-haired boy appeared in front of him, as if it were magic, and hit him on the jaw hard enough to knock him out. Unconscious. "I win," the green-haired man said with an annoying voice catching. He felt his hand burn. Believing that everything was over, the green-haired man closed his eyes to rest for a few seconds. Two hands grabbed him tightly by the arm with which he hit, and two explosions on his same forearm made him let out a scream of pain. Breathing shakily, Bakugo fell to the floor and tried to get up as fast as his body would allow him. However, a presence behind him made him forcibly turn around, lying down with his hand raised to let out another explosion. Izuku slammed his fist against the blonde's chest. The force of the impact made his legs extend to the sky. Bakugo was not far behind. The explosion here at least fell squarely on the green-haired boy, burning the entire torso of his suit and leaving some minor burns on his face. Her fists and his ears hurt to the point of wanting to bleed. "Midoriya. Bakugo," I shout, running to see how Kirishima is doing. Even though he couldn't hear anything his partner was telling him, he told him to move aside and that he was fine, getting up, ignoring what the Retid was yelling at him. His gaze fell on the black-haired woman who was watching him with a frown from the stands. Pointing his finger, the green-haired man stopped breathing and shouted. "You keep going," the green-haired man shouted, looking at her with pain and sadness. Yaoi Rozu did not look the least bit scared, getting up and giving herself the luxury of removing the dust from her clothes. The black-haired woman headed to the battlefield, ready to face the green-haired man. All those present were perplexed by the courage of the black-haired woman, unable to move from their places. The rest could only watch. "Why?" the green-haired man asked, looking into her eyes. "Why what?" "Midoriya," she responded, as if the black-haired woman were a stranger. Gritting his teeth, the green-haired boy took a step closer to the black-haired girl. "Why pretend that nothing happened? That it was all a lie?" Izuku shouted furiously. Aoirozu frowned and positioned herself to fight. "Are we going to fight or not?" he asked, ignoring the boy's question. She used his quirk to create his staff and shield. Feeling his blood burn, the green-haired boy snatched both objects from the black-haired girl, only to tear them, as if they were paper. "Contest him," I shout, taking a step closer to Izuku. Ignoring him again, the black-haired woman continued creating shields and staffs to attack the boy, which ended up destroyed by the impact with the green-haired man's body, or were destroyed manually by him. "Tell me," the green-haired man shouted, already cornering the black-haired girl against the wall of one of the abandoned buildings. The rest of the class had come down from the stands, worried about what the green-haired boy might do to the black-haired girl. Now the pair were surrounded, as if it were a spectacle. Aoirozu gulped. "Why don't I love you?" The black-haired woman screamed at the top of her lungs, feeling a deep pain in her heart at the same time she said it. The green-haired man's already fractured heart shattered at Aoirozu's words. All the anger and sadness he felt during the last few weeks faded away, along with every positive feeling he felt for the black-haired girl. "I understand what the green-haired man said," looking into space. Opening up, he passed between his gaping classmates. Even Uraraka, the one who tried to stop the poor green-haired boy, was carelessly pushed aside. Everyone present no longer knew what to do. At first they came down with the intention of supporting Aoirozu. However, the atmosphere that had been created now seemed to have completely affected everyone's spirits. Like Izuku, the black-haired girl left without saying a word that day. Many of the academy students were talking about a black-haired girl who seemed to be running away from something or someone with tears in her eyes. "Time ago. You said you didn't feel anything," and Sai was disappointed and tired. "I know, but she tried to make up an excuse. Uraraka told me that lately he has been down, and the girl informed him." And irritated, she continued. "Look, I'm trying, but it's the black-haired woman who wanted to explain. She just talks to him." He spoke in an irritated tone. "Staying silent will make things worse," Sai reasoned. "I can't. Sobbed no F." After ignoring him for so long, she began to feel tears coming. "Sai, I really can't understand you," she said, sounding more irritated than annoyed. "You knew that he had feelings for you," and she began to speak. Aoirozu moved her cell phone away a little, hoping that her friend wouldn't hear the small sigh full of sadness that it let out. "If you had been honest with yourself, I would bet that you would be the happiest couple in high school." Sai continued speaking. Unable to contain herself any longer, the black-haired woman began to shed tears, unable to refute the whole truth that her friend was telling her. "Sai, even if you talk to him now, you'd be lucky if he even sees you as a friend." I try to sound positive. Almost a month had passed since the conversation she had had with Tsuyu, in which she questioned her about her feelings for the green-haired boy. Confused, the black-haired girl had been avoiding the green-haired boy at all costs, not being able to bear the amount of emotions that she had. This provoked him. Izuku had tried to ask her the reason for her attitude, but she was only making excuses to escape the situation. It's been a week since the green-haired man hasn't even spoken to her, and that had to happen for Aoirozu to finally realize. "Aoirozu?" Tsuyu called. "Are you there?" she asked worriedly. The black-haired woman listened as her friend continued calling her for a few minutes, but her sobs prevented her from speaking clearly. Her moist eyes did not allow her to see, and the pulsing pain in her heart did not allow her to think. "I ruined everything. Time after." Aoirozu felt empty, like she was alone in the universe. She ignored everyone, she missed classes, and she wasn't herself. Since the dueling incident, the black-haired girl did nothing but lock herself in her room and feel melancholic and miserable. Izuku, on the other hand, didn't have a different time than the black-haired girl at first. He had stopped going to train for a while. That was already something drastic. Knowing him well, there were also times when he forgot to eat or even go to the academy. However, Izuku did not allow himself to be defeated by the negativity. After a private talk with Uraraka and Iida, his two best friends after her, the green-haired boy found the support he needed at the right time. Little by little, the boy began to return to being altruistic and determined Izuku from before. Even so, the simple fact of having her clothes caused the green-haired boy pain, not only because it seemed that she was the one who was having a worse time than him, something that didn't make sense, since he was the one who ended up with the heart broken. I had to do something about it. After a long talk with Director Nedzu about the problem he had, Izuku discovered that the academy had planned years ago to start a worldwide expansion program, but unfortunately the project was abandoned due to lack of student interest. "Let me try," the green-haired man said determinedly. "Well, these are the requirements." The rodent handed him a paper. Stretching out the paper, Izuku almost fainted when he saw the amount of things that the different hero schools from foreign countries asked of him. It would be a feat to complete so many requirements. "Maybe he could ask you for help." The green-haired boy stopped mid-thinking. It was true that with the black-haired girl's help, the program would have been much easier for Izuku, but he decided not to bother her. And then the green-haired man went through what he would call the hellish weeks for the rest of his life, the poor time of staying up late, over stress, and exhaustion. But he did it, and now here he was, with the acceptance paper in one hand, and the other squeezing the hand of his director, accepting his congratulations. "Are you sure you don't want the school to recognize your achievement, son?" Nezu asked a little sadly. "I'm happy to know that you've made it, Mr. Director," the green-haired man said with a smile. "Well, it will be, as you wish." The rodent raised his thumb in approval. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity." Izuku bowed respectfully. "Thank you, son." Nezu also bowed. "For your great effort." He sounded proud. "I'll go then," said the green-haired man, heading towards the exit. "Please don't forget our agreement," he asked, a little embarrassed. My mouth was sealed, so the director made a gesture with his hands. If everything went as Izuku planned, maybe he could solve things between her and him. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.